You know, one of the most interesting things that I have to work with, with Audible Elegance in Cincinnati, is the concept of listener fatigue. And this is a really elusive one for most people. And early on, I was taught about a system from the Lynn folks, I'll be honest, about listening to rhythm, pitch, emotion, and making sure that those are all aligned properly. And I had to think about it for a little bit, and I realized that it really does work. Now, I'm going to give you an example where it doesn't involve, any audio system per se. And I'm going to talk about car stereo, which is its own little unique world. And if you've ever tried to listen to music on a long distance trip with a car stereo using the FM stations long ago, so sorry about that, you would find that after an hour or two, you would start fiddling with the bass and the treble, trying to make it less annoying. Finding that didn't resolve the problem, so you would change the station and go over to another station and maybe last a half hour or so. And then change again until finally you wind up on a talk show or a sporting event, and then you're happy for the next 6 or 7 hours of driving. And if you go back, you can do this still with your car stereo system. I'm sure most of them still have FM. Simply turn it on and listen to it in your car and try to tap your foot to the music. And what you'll discover is that while you can get a bass line or a drummer to your foot, you can't get the singer on the same beat. And then you'll discover that there's other people like the lead guitarist or any type of music where they're simply not synchronized. And this is a real core fundamental issue, because when things are not synchronized, your brain is scrambling to try to make it synchronized. And the poorer the system, the quicker it becomes fatiguing. And no amount of fiddling with bass or treble really resolves it. Now, certainly there can be glaring tonal problems with the system. I'm not going to deny that. But again, the usual source of listening fatigue is the fact that things are not synchronized at all. I'm very, very much in that mode. That's the principle that guides our store. It's how we evaluate things. If you can't get it musically right as is written on a piece of sheet music and you put a ruler on it, what do you know? They all line up. If it doesn't do that, I don't care what the cost of the system is. I don't care what the reviews say. It's not right. Now, our job as a store is to figure out whether we're doing something wrong or whether the reviewer themselves wasn't paying any attention to this. And that does happen. And I'll get into a video later on about reviewers and some of them that I've written about the very mistakes they've made. So, you've got to have it rhythmically right, and that's the primary source of listening fatigue. Improper notes are annoying as anything. We've all heard musicians play the wrong note. So, to me, if you cannot hum along with a piece of music, but you find yourself constantly recorrecting yourself to find the right note, again, that's wrong. The way I show this to people is simply ask them, have they ever fooled around with a piano? Now, almost everybody has. It's 88 keys of Touch Me. It invites screwing around. And even if you are not, a pianist, you recognize that as you're henpecking between the keys, that certain notes fit together while others do not. And I'm not going to get into dissonance. That's a different subject altogether. But you begin to peck out something known as the tune. And it may not be a tune you recognize, but at least you feel comfortable with the relationship of one note to the next. And that's the relationships. Again, if you look at a piece of sheet music, they're just not random dots and bars and, funny little squigglies all over the place without intent. They're all planned. Anybody who's sung choral, which I have, there's a real strong relationship between SATB. There's a place for us in time and a place for us in notes. So that's my take on where listening fatigue typically comes from. And I invite you to use, your car stereo as an example. I've shown some people that there is in fact a huge musical difference in performance between Sirius radio systems, shocking a couple people. And but again, when it's not musically right, it will eventually become annoying. I think the peak of trying to be not annoying was the beginning of New Age music, where it really didn't have a strong rhythmic structure. Some of it did, but it was pleasing tones and it was calming, and that's fine. I actually listen to quite a bit of that, but it has to be musically right. I have a favorite piece I use right now that's only available by streaming, and that's the way it is. So think about your system. If it's annoying you, is it rhythmically right to begin with? Is it playing the right notes? And if you have a vocalist, does it sound like they're singing or speaking? And do they even care about what they're singing about? And this will be a guide as you change equipment, cables, anything, that if you're spending money, those elements should improve. If you're just doing, as Julian Veriker said, changing one sort of bad for another, then get your refund on that product, because it's not helping you, improve your system. And the key is that you're not improving the music. The key is you're getting the system out of the way of the musical performance. You have to look at it from that way. There's very little recorded music, particularly of pop, big artists, that are a musical nightmare. They're actually extraordinarily good. It's the system that's making them less so. I can think back to some albums that were very successful, and then the follow-up was a disaster. Paul Simon had 2 albums almost back-to-back. One was Graceland, which was enormously popular. It had a fairly simple beat structure based upon African music. And then his follow-up album was based upon Latin music, which was far more complex. And that album foundered. And unless the system is really good, it just comes off as basically a musical nightmare. Even rap itself is extremely rhythmically tight. And if it sounds like just a whole bunch of screaming and yelling and making no sense, it's probably the system. But, it's not music that I prefer listening to, but I will use it to challenge systems. So there we are. If you want to know where listening fatigue starts, tap your foot and you'll find the source. Thank you.